I don't know. No, we're ready for it. Battery is low. Let me see if I can swap. It's just as dead.
Test 2 3, test. Test 2 3.
We need to ask for another mic, another battery.
Test 2 3, test.
Okay, so it's running a little low.
Okay.
It should be okay though, hopefully for the next 30.
Okay.
I'm sending for another battery, but it should be okay.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Is there room up here to put this? No. I have no idea who's going to talk to what slides if we don't have to. It's going to be fun.
You, me. I think the next one is me. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
I'll let you start.
Okay.
Here's what you can start.
Okay. Stephen, are you going to count us down?
What I'll do is I'll ask if you're ready, and then I'll just point you when we're actually.
Excellent. Are you guys ready? Yeah. Woo!
I mean, come on, it's almost beer time. We need more excitement than that.
Yes! And we're on. All right, thank you guys for coming to our DerbyCon talk. This is our very first DerbyCon and our very first DerbyCon talk. So, yes. We are going to talk to you about Shadow IT in the cloud. But first, a little introduction. So I grew up in the Army as an intelligence analyst. I spent another 10-ish years in the DC area working for different intel missions up there before I decided I needed to maybe consider the possibility that world peace might break out and I should find a new career. So along the way, I got a bachelor's and master's degree in information assurance. And then I joined USAA. I started in the SOC about 9 years ago, and have kind of worked around different teams since then. Now I'm on the team responsible for cloud security, among other things.
And I'm Marissa Dyer. Actually, personal note, recently married, but told my husband that the dog was cuter, so she made it to the presentation. I've been at USA a little over 6 years. I've done a couple things, software development, sysadmin. Currently, though, I'm serving as one of our cloud security engineers, and so we're working to manage and secure our workloads that USA is using in the CSPs, and that includes AWS, Microsoft Azure, and GCP, and came straight from college out from University of El Paso in El Paso, Texas, and came straight to USA from there.
So at USAA, we always start with our mission slide, and so we thought we'd share that with you guys. USAA exists to facilitate the financial security of our military members, right? And so then on the cybersecurity side, we exist to ensure the data security for our members and our employees, because we know that the military folks aren't going to trust us with their money and their business if we can't protect their data. So we really are here to ensure that we're protecting that data so that the company can achieve its mission of helping the military achieve financial security. So we have an agenda slide because all good presentations have one, I've been told. We originally wrote this talk for a less technical audience, so some of these things we'll skip over in the interest of time, but we just want to talk about at a basic level what is Shadow IT. We'll probably skip over what is a cloud. I think everybody knows that here. And then when you bring those two things together, what amazing things can happen. And then we'll talk about some strategies to help you address that in your organizations.
So as just mentioned, we have used this presentation at other conferences, and we've submitted it to other conferences, right? Technical, non-technical, and we've actually been honored to be chosen for places like DerbyCon to be able to present this stuff to you guys. But we have gotten some rejections, and this is actually some feedback that we wanted to share with y'all on a rejection that we got. So I'm gonna go ahead and read it out for y'all. Your proposal sounds immature. You make the assumption that your IT department is unaware of what is being used and downloaded, and somehow your data is in someone else's hands. Now if you, thank you, I'm so glad that hit home. Okay, so if you know what Shadow IT is, which obviously we do, that's the feedback on why they rejected us is the definition of Shadow IT. So the biggest thing we want you to take away from this, if nothing else, is just an awareness of what Shadow IT is, and that it probably does exist at your company or your place of work. And it's just something we need to be aware of so that we can be aware of those risks and vulnerabilities and then know how to protect ourselves against all that stuff. And then just some stats around Shadow IT. Again, you guys probably know or are familiar with a lot of this stuff. I mean, over 80% of users admit to using tools and applications that they didn't try to get vetted through IT or security because that process sucks, and because security are the no people. And so I'm not gonna go talk to them and have them turn me down or make me go through some lengthy process. And so yeah, they'll admit that, yeah, I've used a lot of stuff. I swiped that corporate card and started using some trial, and I forgot I started using it 2 years ago, and that's just been charging up on there, right? Some common Shadow IT is like bring your own device, right? You're plugging something in that's foreign to the network or hasn't been vetted, or you're using a device that isn't managed by security. So we have no idea if it's on the latest version or it's getting all the patches and upgrades, and so it's got those vulnerabilities. Communication apps, huge history of companies being attacked via those free chat sites, right? For the user, it's super easy for them to just go into that chat site, helps them get their work done. They can just share this code with this person and that person, but they don't know who actually owns and manages that data, right? Or they're sharing this code or this sensitive information. We don't know that they're using this app at all, so we don't have any DLP monitoring on that. We have no idea what's going out there.
So and everybody here knows what the cloud is. I won't spend too much time on this slide. I will point out, though, that when your executives talk to you about what are we doing for cloud security, they mean SaaS in addition to IaaS and PaaS, right? And as a security person, I hear, oh, what are we doing for cloud security? I'm thinking, oh, well, we've got these guardrails in place for AWS, and we're doing this code scanning. And SaaS, to me, is just contractual controls, but it's not really. There's some additional security controls you have to have in place, and your executives, when they're talking about the cloud, need to understand what you're doing for SaaS in addition to IaaS and PaaS. And so when we talk about Shadow IT in the cloud, right, we go from nightmares to night terrors, right? Where before I just had an unpatched laptop on my network, now I might have a business unit that stood up an S3 bucket using their corporate card, so I have no idea that it's out there. And they went and created their own account. It's not even inside my organizational tenant. And maybe they made it read, write, execute to the world, right? And they're serving a website on serving static content to a website from that S3 bucket. Now, these are all hypothetical situations. I should have said that up front, right? This would never ever happen in your organization or mine, right? But now there's a website with static content that's read, write, execute. Well, that's cool. You're taking customer traffic there. But what happens if bad guy decides to host his static content in your S3 bucket as well, and now you're serving malware to your customers? Or lab accounts, right? A lab account is still an account in your cloud, your organization's cloud footprint, and Brian Krebs, folks, is not going to care when your lab account gets compromised and you say, oh, it's just lab, it's not prod, right? He's not going to care. He's still going to write about you in not the nicest way. Or, like Marissa talked about, using corporate cards to stand up accounts in the cloud. They forget about it, they never deploy it, right? So some developer went up and spun up a whole bunch of resources, never tore it down, and 6 months later, what does that do to your organization's budget? And this is one of my favorite ones. So this is more of a SaaS type application, right? Code beautifier sites are my personal favorite because every developer wants pretty code, right? And so they just go paste their code into whatever code beautifier site they find, and it makes it nice and pretty for them. but they never read the EULA, which says that the content they posted up there now is the MIT Common License, and all of your intellectual property now belongs to the internet. So thank you, developers, right? On the internet, we appreciate that, but for your organization, probably not so much. So what do we have to do, right? Zero trust. We heard Nicole previously talk about zero trust from the application development standpoint. We have to explicitly allow and deny everything else. IAM in the cloud, and Marissa's going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, but IAM, especially in your IaaS and PaaS, really is your new network boundary. So you have to have least privilege access. CASBs are good for SaaS solutions, right? CASB is really just DLP for your SaaS providers or SaaS applications, and they allow you to examine web traffic and identify those cloud users. I think probably you could go a step further there and combine a CASB with something that's scanning purchase orders and invoices and corporate cards to identify cloud usage that's not gone through any type of approval process. And then governance around new use cases, right? So as we're all looking to deploy to the cloud, there should be some type of approval process that says, hey, I've got this use case and I think it would be really cool in the cloud, but maybe I've got a VM on-prem that could serve it just as well. It doesn't make sense to introduce the risk of putting that into the cloud when we can provide solutions for that on-prem. And employee training, right? Just like your developer doesn't think of that Code Beautifier site as a cloud application that he's posting his data to, I'm sure any other of your users are just as confused when you talk about software purchasing, and software in the cloud counts as software. And then scanning corporate card data.
Yeah, so like Jess mentioned, I'm going to go into kind of some detail on some things you can do from a security perspective, right, to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your company from these kind of risks. But the biggest thing to me is, like I said earlier, awareness and then training, right? Making sure that people know exactly what they're doing, why maybe you're making them go through the process of like a cloud review panel or something to get that approval for whatever their business justification is. And along with that is developers and making sure they have the training as well. So not just why we're allowing you to use the cloud or not use the cloud, but what happens when you're actually in there, when you stand up a VM, when you have an EC2, when you have that S3 bucket. And so people are going in, they're kind of playing, it's fun, it's lab, and they want to just get started and kind of run around in the cloud because it's a new cool thing. I get it, right? It is fun and it is exciting, but it's knowing and having that training to know, okay, when I stand up this instance, these are all the things that get stood up with it. These security groups, these EC2 instances, this network security group. What are my defaults? What do those look like, right? Do I have some crazy 0000 rule open somewhere? And so knowing that whole process, and then again, going back to they leave stuff open and don't close it down, well, maybe they did, but they didn't realize when I terminated my EC2 instance, but I didn't know that I still had all these security groups and everything else open, right? So again, that training just really is the first line of defense to making sure before anybody's even out there that these folks know exactly what's going on. So again, once you're already in there, this is just some things you can do. So this is at a proxy level, right? We have a proxy rule that's looking at, and these are examples from USA. These are rules that we're using. These are sites, so we call it our Shadow IT sites, right? These are blocks for sites that we either know are malicious, can be malicious, or SaaS sites that haven't even been vetted, but we've either seen somebody use them, or we've been made aware of them, or we use scanners that can actually look for sites like that. We just create an object list, add those sites in there as needed, and then our rule blocks that the access to that external URL for our users. And so you go a step further. Again, our users are doing this kind of stuff, Shadow IT stuff, because they just want to get their work done, right? They're not trying to be malicious. They're not trying to hurt the company. They just want to get their work done as fast and as quickly and easily as possible. And so we want to help them too. So we create a defined exception, a specific exception that kind of tells them what we're blocking and why we're blocking it and what they can do if they actually have a business reason to get that opened up. So again, this is an actual example of what we show at USA whenever somebody hits a site on that Shadow IT block. This will show, again, that their site is blocked for a specific reason. So it's because we see that you're going to a cloud application, and so if you have an actual business purpose for using this, here's a request you can submit, blah, 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 and then we get the tech details to us that actually help us look at the logs and say, okay, did they get the block we think they're getting for the reason we think they're getting it? What's their source? All that kind of good stuff. And so this helps both sides, right? It tells them that we're trying to help them out, but we just need to look at some stuff first and go through some processes, and then sometimes maybe they're going to see this and go, never mind, I'll use some other app that I know is already allowed, right? Another quick example at the proxy level. So, of course, the proxy level, we're looking at everything going into external traffic, right? So we have specific AD groups that define users that have access, some business purpose for hitting Azure, right? So first off, on an IAM level, they have to be a part of that group, that AD group. Once they're a part of that AD group, then on the proxy we have a rule that says, okay, we state you're part of this group, which narrows it down to only the users and employees that have a business justification for using Azure, right? So you're in this group, you've been allowed, here's the sites you can hit, and now you can get to Azure. And even once you're in there, there's still more IAM policies and things that are in place for your subscriptions and resource groups and all that kind of good stuff. And then another example, this one's at the IAM level, is SAML Federation. So something as simple and as high level as blocking any connections that are outside your network, right? So the user's assigned to this group, and you can see that it takes priority here. So it's going to look at the first rule first, take that action, then go to the second. So first priority, users assigned to this app, so it means they have access here, but they're not in our zone, they're not in our network. Deny. I don't care who you are, what you have access to, you're coming from an external IP, you're not in our internal network, you're out, right? And the last example, this one's specific to AWS. If you guys know a little bit about AWS, you know that they have service control policies, or SCPs. And again, very high level, this is a simple one that you can put in place, that we've put in place for region restriction. And so all this does, again, super simple. We know that our users don't have any kind of reason why they would need to use AWS regions outside of the US. So we have an SCP in place that denies everything, any kind of usage, services, account creation, resource creation, anything outside of any of the US regions.
So when you, in a security organization, when you're getting ready to, or examining your cloud infrastructure, it can be a little bit overwhelming, right? Where do I start? How do I approach this? How do I, build durable teams to address these issues? And a couple of things we thought we'd share with you that were really helpful to us. The Cloud Security Alliance has a cloud controls matrix. If you're not familiar with it, definitely go check it out. So they break down for all of the different control domains, and they tell you what security controls you should have in place, and then they tie it back to regulatory requirements, which makes it really easy as you're not only building out the technical and administrative controls themselves, but also working on building out your audit documentation if you're in a regulated environment like we are, building out your controls and control tests and all that documentation to share with the regulators. Being able to tie each control back to the specific regulatory requirement is super helpful, and the Cloud Security Alliance has done all that work for you, so definitely leverage that. And then this one is AWS specific. So AWS has on their website, they've got an FFIEC audit handbook for AWS that tells you exactly what the auditors are going to come in and look for. And linked off of that same page is a link to a spreadsheet that again does almost the same thing, except this one is tailored specifically to AWS. And it tells you what AWS will do for a control and what you in the shared responsibility model are responsible for, and then ties it again back to the different security control frameworks and regulatory requirements. So don't reinvent the wheel, leverage the resources that are out there for you. And then this is kind of how we've structured our approach to IaaS at USAA. So at a very, very top level, right, first you should just define what cloud services you're going to offer to your environment or to your company, right? You shouldn't just open up AWS or Azure or GCP and tell the developers, hey, go wild, right? Bad things are going to happen. So build out a service catalog, right? These are the things that you can have in AWS right now, and next quarter we'll have these additional services available to you, but definitely have a defined catalog of what you're going to offer, and offer them only once you have security controls in place for those services. Governance controls, so this is absolutely critical, right? If you are putting applications in the cloud, if you're storing data in the cloud, your CISO is responsible for the risk associated with that data and those applications, and you have to have a big picture view of everything that you have in the cloud. So having those governance controls in place, having a decision point, yes, this application can go to the cloud, no, it can't. Yes, this data can go to the cloud as long as it's encrypted or tokenized, or, oh, this data is above the classification level that we've decided is allowed in the cloud. Sorry, you need to stay on-prem, right? But having that control gate in place and formalized in your organization is absolutely critical. It should be backed by a cloud policy. How many companies have taken the time to write a cloud policy yet, right? But that's one of the things that you have to have in place in order to enforce the rules that you're trying to implement. And we'll kind of skip around. Marissa talked about preventive controls. Asset management is huge, right? Not just from I'm a security, I work on the vuln management team and I have to know what servers are out there so I know what to vuln scan and what I need to patch. But on the billing side, right? How many developers have spun up resources and not torn them down, and now on the billing side, we're absolutely getting crushed every month when that AWS or GCP bill comes in. And then on the software side, right? If we're deploying applications and I have to write custom rules to allow this app to talk to the internet but not this app, or this server to talk to the internet but not the server, without that asset inventory being able to tie it back to the resources, we're just opening everything up to everything, and it's not going to be good at the end of the day. IAM controls are really, again, the boundary of your cloud environment. So you have to have core controls on who can do what in the internet or in the cloud, and practice a least privilege policy. We talked about SCPs as binary controls. Yes, you can do something, or no, you can't. SCPs are like your firewall rules for the internet. They're very clear. Yes, you can talk to the internet. No, you can't. Yes, you can deploy in this region. No, you can't. These are very critical layer in your cloud security deployment model. And then on the assurance side, we've been very fortunate to have some talented folks that have written a lot of custom scripts to go out and scan our cloud environment, looking for misconfigurations for those public S3 buckets, for those servers that have SSH or RDP open to the internet, right? Because we're blocking it at the proxy level, so you can't get there from on-prem. So you have to have that assurance function in place to find those things that are kind of going around your policies. Ideally, you're deploying infrastructure as code. Everything's going through a pipeline. You've got your Terraform modules or your CloudFormation or whatever you're using, so that all the security checks are done in the pipeline. But we all need that just in case secure assurance function just to be there. Any questions?